A wounded bear cub is rescued by a team in the Arctic, but the mother's unexpected behavior left even the experts speechless. The wind howled through the vast Arctic expanse, carrying with it the weight of urgency that Dr. Emily Carter couldn't ignore. The emergency signal had come through just hours ago, its coordinates pointing to an abandoned research station that hadn't seen human activity in months. As she adjusted her thermal gear inside the rescue helicopter, Emily's mind raced with possibilities. 20 years of Arctic wildlife research hadn't prepared her for the mix of anticipation and dread that churned in her stomach. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. Let's keep going. ETA 5 minutes, David Parker, their seasoned paramedic, shouted over the helicopter's rhythmic thrum. His experience in extreme conditions made him invaluable, but even he couldn't hide the concern in his voice. Beside him, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, their wildlife veterinarian, methodically checked her medical supplies for the third time, her movements precise despite the helicopter's constant vibration. Emily's connection to the Arctic wilderness went beyond professional interest. Since her first expedition as a young biologist, she had developed an almost mystical understanding of this harsh yet delicate ecosystem. The distress signal from the abandoned station felt personal, as if the ice itself was calling out for help. "Weather's deteriorating fast," the pilot announced, his voice tight with concentration, temperatures dropping below what was forecasted. "We'll need to make this quick." Through the helicopter's window, Emily could see the research station emerging from the whiteness below. The structure looked intact from above, but something about the scene felt wrong. No movement, no signs of recent activity, just an eerie stillness that seemed to pulse against the gathering storm. As they descended, Sarah pointed to something in the distance. "Look at those tracks in the snow," she said, her voice barely audible above the noise. "They're fresh, and they're not human." Emily's heart skipped a beat as she followed Sarah's gesture. The tracks told a story, one of desperation and struggle. They led toward the station, in an erratic pattern. Unlike the usual purposeful movement of Arctic wildlife, the helicopter touched down 50 yards from the station, its rotors stirring up a miniature blizzard. The team moved with practiced efficiency, securing their gear and double-checking their communication devices. They had maybe 3 hours before the incoming storm would force them to evacuate, with or without answers. "Remember," Emily briefed them as they prepared to exit, "we stay together. Something's not right here, and in these conditions, separation means disaster." The cold hit them like a physical force as they stepped onto the ice. Emily led the way, her years of experience guiding each step. The research station loomed before them, its windows dark and uninviting. As they approached, the signs of chaos became more apparent: scattered equipment, broken sensors, and what looked like desperate attempts to secure loose items against a previous storm. Sarah suddenly grabbed Emily's arm, her grip tight through their thick gloves. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. The team froze, straining to hear anything beyond the wind's mournful song. Then it came again, a sound that didn't belong in this desolate landscape, a weak, plaintive cry that spoke of pain and fear. Emily's training kicked in, her mind cataloging the possible sources of that sound. It wasn't human, but it wasn't the typical call of any Arctic species she knew either. The cry came again, leading them around the station's perimeter. What they found stopped them in their tracks. A section of thin ice had partially collapsed, creating a natural trap. And there, struggling weakly against the unforgiving elements, lay a polar bear cub, its white fur stained with red. The sight was heartbreaking enough, but what made Emily's breath catch in her throat was the massive figure standing in the distance, the mother bear watching them with an intelligence that seemed to transcend the natural order. "Sarah," Emily said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "what are we looking at?" The veterinarian was already assessing the situation, her professional demeanor masking the emotion in her eyes. "Severe lacerations, possible internal injuries. In these temperatures, that cub has maybe an hour left without intervention." David scanned the area, his medical training applying equally to their safety as to any potential rescue. The mother, "She's not charging. That's not normal behavior." Emily couldn't take her eyes off the mother bear. In all her years studying Arctic wildlife, she had never seen anything like this. The bear's posture, Her careful distance, the way she seemed to be waiting, it defied everything Emily knew about ursine behavior. "We need to make a decision," Sarah pressed, her medical kit already halfway open. "That cub needs immediate attention." The mother bear took a single step forward, then stopped. Her dark eyes fixed on Emily with an intensity that felt like communication. In that moment, as the wind whipped around them and the light began to fade, Emily made a decision that would challenge everything she thought she knew about the boundaries between humans and wildlife. "Set up emergency shelter here," she commanded, her voice carrying the weight of authority earned through years in the field. "We're not leaving that cub to perish, but we're going to do this right." She turned to her team, seeing the same determination reflected in their faces. "We're about to attempt something unprecedented, and we're going to need every bit of skill and luck we have." The mother bear watched, motionless, as they began to unpack their emergency equipment. The sun was setting behind the gathering storm clouds, casting an otherworldly glow across the ice. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to become part of something extraordinary, a moment where the lines between species would blur in the name of survival and compassion. The emergency shelter took shape against the darkening Arctic sky, a beacon of warmth in the vast whiteness. Sarah worked with focused intensity, laying out her medical supplies while David secured the shelter's perimeter. Emily never took her eyes off the mother bear, who maintained her vigil with an almost supernatural patience. "The shelter's stable," David announced, his breath visible in the frigid air. "But this storm's moving in faster than predicted. We need to move quickly." Emily nodded, her mind racing through scenarios. The standard protocols for wildlife rescue never accounted for something like this. A mother bear essentially seeking human help. Every instinct honed through years of field research told her this was unprecedented. "Sarah, what's your assessment?" Emily asked, watching as the veterinarian conducted a careful visual examination of the trapped cub from their current position. "The bleeding seems to be coming from multiple lacerations. The cold is actually helping slow the blood loss, but it's also increasing the risk of hypothermia. We need to get to him now." Sarah's voice carried the weight of professional certainty mixed with genuine concern. The mother bear suddenly shifted her position, taking 3 careful steps closer to the group. The movement was so deliberate, it made Emily's heart race. Instead of the aggressive behavior typical of a protective mother, this bear's body language spoke of something else entirely. Desperation tinged with what Emily could only describe as hope. "Look at her posture," Emily whispered to her teammates. "She's relaxed her shoulders, kept her head low. These are submission signals. She's asking for help." Sarah gasped softly. "In all my years working with wildlife, I've never seen anything like this. It goes against everything we know about polar bear behavior." The cub let out another weak cry, and the mother bear's response was immediate. A soft rumble that seemed to carry both comfort and distress. The sound struck something deep in Emily's core, a recognition of maternal instinct that transcended species. "We need to try something unconventional," Emily declared, her voice steady despite the gravity of what she was about to propose. "Sarah, prepare your medical kit. David, keep the shelter ready for immediate access. I'm going to establish direct contact." "Emily, that's incredibly risky," David protested, though his tone suggested he understood the necessity. "If she charges—" "She won't," Emily interrupted, her certainty surprising even herself. "Look at her eyes. She knows we're her cub's only chance." With slow, deliberate movements, Emily began to approach the edge of the ice where the cub lay trapped. She maintained constant eye contact with the mother bear, her steps careful and measured. The wind whipped around them, carrying ice crystals that stung any exposed skin, but Emily remained focused. 20 feet from the cub, she stopped. The mother bear watched her intently, making no aggressive moves. Emily slowly knelt in the snow, making herself appear smaller, less threatening. Then, in a move that made Sarah and David hold their breath, she removed her outer glove and extended her bare hand palm up toward the mother bear. The massive creature tilted her head, studying Emily's gesture. Then, with a grace that belied her enormous size, she took several steps forward, closing the distance between them. The bear's breath clouded in the frigid air as she lowered her head to Emily's level, her nostrils flaring as she took in Emily's scent. Sarah watched in amazement, her medical kit clutched tightly to her chest. "It's like she understands exactly what we're trying to do," she whispered to David, who stood ready to act if needed. The moment stretched like ice crystals forming in the Arctic air, delicate, beautiful, and impossibly fragile. Then the mother bear did something that would forever change how Emily understood the relationship between humans and wildlife. She stepped back, creating a clear path to her injured cub, and sat down in the snow, her eyes never leaving Emily's face. "Sarah," Emily called softly, "bring your kit." Slowly. "She's giving us permission." As Sarah carefully made her way forward with her medical supplies, the mother bear remained still, her only movement the steady rise and fall of her chest. The cub, sensing the approaching humans, lifted its head weakly, releasing a small whimper. "The ice here is too thin for all of us," David observed, testing the surface with his boot. "We need to create a stable path to reach him." Emily nodded, her mind already formulating a plan. The storm clouds overhead were growing darker, and the wind was picking up strength. They had precious little time to save this cub, but they had just been given something invaluable: trust from one of the Arctic's most powerful predators. The team began their careful approach to the injured cub, with the mother bear watching their every move. In that moment, on the vast Arctic ice, something extraordinary was unfolding. A collaboration between species, driven by the most fundamental force in nature, a mother's love for her child. The Arctic wind intensified as Emily and Sarah inched closer to the injured cub. Every step had to be calculated. One wrong move on the thin ice could spell disaster for everyone involved. David maintained his position near the emergency shelter, ready to provide backup if needed, while keeping a watchful eye on both the approaching storm and the mother bear. "The ice is creaking," Sarah whispered, her medical kit held tightly against her chest. "We need to distribute our weight carefully." Emily nodded, her eyes darting between the injured cub and the surrounding ice. Years of Arctic experience had taught her to read the subtle signs of ice stability, but this situation was pushing the limits of her expertise. The cub lay in a shallow depression where the ice had partially given way, creating a natural trap that had both injured and confined it. As they got closer, the extent of the cub's injuries became clearer. Multiple lacerations along the right side, Sarah assessed professionally, though her voice trembled slightly. "Looks like he tried to climb out and the ice edges cut into him. The cold has actually helped slow the bleeding, but he's showing signs of hypothermia." The mother bear remained remarkably still, her dark eyes following their every movement. The only indication of her anxiety was the occasional soft rumble she directed at her cub, which the little one answered with weak whimpers. "We need to create a stable platform," Emily decided, reaching for the specialized equipment they'd brought from the shelter. "The ice won't support all of us trying to lift him out at once." Working with practiced efficiency, despite the biting cold, they began deploying the lightweight but strong rescue platforms designed for ice rescue. The wind continued to intensify, driving snow and ice crystals horizontally across the vast white expanse. Time was becoming increasingly precious as the storm front approached. Sarah's hands moved with careful precision as she prepared her medical supplies. "Once we get him out, I'll need to work quickly. The bleeding might increase once we move him, and in these temperatures we can't risk keeping him exposed for long." The cub watched them with eyes that seemed too understanding, too aware for such a young animal. Its mother's patient presence defied everything Emily knew about polar bear behavior. In normal circumstances, they would have been attacked the moment they approached the cub. Instead, they were experiencing something unprecedented, a conscious cooperation between species. "Ready with the platform," Emily announced, testing its stability one final time. "Sarah, you'll need to work from here while I help secure him." "David," she called out to their teammate by the shelter, "we're going to need the thermal blankets." David quickly approached with the supplies, his movements careful but urgent. The storm was visibly worsening, the wind howling with increasing ferocity across the ice. The mother bear shifted slightly, adjusting her position to block some of the wind from reaching her cub and the rescue team. The next few moments would require perfect coordination. Emily positioned herself nearest to the cub, while Sarah prepared her medical supplies on the stable platform. The mother bear watched intently, her massive form a stark white silhouette against the darkening sky. "Hey there, little one," Emily spoke softly to the cub, maintaining a gentle, soothing tone despite the howling wind. "We're going to help you. Just stay calm for us." The cub's eyes fixed on Emily, and in that moment she felt a connection that transcended the natural order. This wasn't just another wildlife rescue. This was something deeper, something that spoke to the very essence of compassion and trust in nature. With infinite care, Emily began the delicate process of freeing the cub from its icy trap. Every movement had to be precise. Too rough and they risked further injury. Too gentle and they wouldn't be able to free him from the ice's grip. Sarah stayed ready with her medical supplies, while David maintained his position, dividing his attention between the approaching storm and their precious cargo. The mother bear's continued patience was nothing short of miraculous. She remained in her position, occasionally making soft vocalizations that seemed to comfort her cub. The wind whipped around them with increasing fury, but the bear's presence created a sort of calm center in the midst of the storm. "Almost there," Emily muttered, her muscles straining with the effort of maintaining such careful control in the extreme cold. The cub released a small cry of pain, and immediately both the mother bear and Sarah tensed. But there was no aggression, no panic, just a shared concern that seemed to unite human and animal in this desperate moment. Time seemed to slow as they worked, each second crucial in their race against both the approaching storm and the cub's declining condition. The Arctic wilderness around them had become a swirling mass of white, but in their immediate vicinity, a remarkable scene of interspecies cooperation was unfolding, one that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the boundaries between humans and wildlife. The moment the cub was finally freed from the ice, a new set of challenges emerged. Sarah immediately began her initial assessment, her trained hands moving with swift precision despite the brutal cold. The mother bear had risen to her feet, but remained remarkably calm, her eyes fixed on her cub with an intensity that spoke volumes about maternal devotion. "Multiple lacerations, severe hypothermia," Sarah reported, her professional tone barely masking her concern. "We need to get him to the shelter now. His core temperature is dangerously low." The wind had picked up considerably, turning the Arctic landscape into a swirling chaos of white. Emily could barely make out the shelter's outline through the intensifying storm, even though it was only 50 yards away. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and every minute of exposure threatened the cub's survival. "David," Emily called out, "we need a clear path to the shelter. The snow's already starting to drift." David immediately began marking the safest route with high visibility markers, fighting against the wind that threatened to knock him off balance. The mother bear watched their preparations with an almost human-like understanding, following their movements with unwavering attention. "Emily," Sarah's voice carried a note of urgency, "his breathing is becoming labored. We can't wait any longer." The team had prepared a specialized transport sled, padded with thermal materials to protect the injured cub. With extreme care, they began the delicate process of moving him. The cub released a weak whimper, causing his mother to take a step forward, but she stopped when Emily raised her hand gently. "It's okay." Emily found herself speaking to the mother bear as if she could understand every word. "We're helping him. Trust us a little longer." The bear's response was remarkable. She backed up slightly, creating more space for them to work, while maintaining her vigilant watch. The wind howled around them, driving ice crystals that stung any exposed skin, but the bear's presence seemed to create a bubble of calm in the midst of the storm. Working together with practiced efficiency, they secured the cub in the transport sled. Sarah stayed by his side, monitoring his condition, while Emily and David positioned themselves to guide the sled across the treacherous ice. The mother bear began to move parallel to their path, matching their pace with surprising grace despite her massive size. "The ice is getting more unstable," David warned, testing each step carefully. "The temperature drop is causing new cracks to form." Emily could hear the ice groaning beneath them, a sound that sent chills down her spine despite her years of Arctic experience. They had to maintain a perfect balance between speed and caution. Move too quickly, and they risked disaster on the weakening ice. Too slowly, and the cub's condition could deteriorate beyond saving. The journey to the shelter, though relatively short in distance, felt like an eternity. The storm had evolved into a full-blown blizzard, reducing visibility to mere feet. The only constant was the white form of the mother bear, moving like a ghost through the swirling snow, never letting her cub out of her sight. Sarah continued her work as they moved, doing what she could to stabilize the cub's condition. "His heart rate is steady," she reported over the wind's howl, "but we need to get him warm soon." As they approached the shelter, Emily made a decision that went against every safety protocol she'd ever learned. "We need to let the mother bear stay close," she announced. "She's not just any wild animal. She's showing intelligence and trust beyond anything I've ever seen." David looked skeptical but nodded. "I'll adjust the shelter's perimeter. But Emily, if anything goes wrong—" "It won't," Emily stated, with a certainty she felt in her bones. This is something different, something special. They reached the shelter just as the storm reached its full fury. The mother bear positioned herself near the entrance, creating a windbreak that helped them maneuver the sled through the door. Her actions seemed deliberate, calculated, as if she understood exactly what needed to be done to help her cub. Inside the shelter, Sarah immediately began setting up her medical equipment, while David secured the entrance. The space was small, but it offered precious protection from the lethal cold outside. Through the shelter's reinforced windows, they could see the mother bear settling into a protective position, her massive form visible even through the swirling snow. Emily watched as Sarah began her more thorough examination of the cub, her hands steady, despite the gravity of the situation. The bond between mother and child had transcended natural barriers, leading to this unprecedented moment of trust between species. As the storm raged outside, Emily couldn't help but feel they were part of something extraordinary, a moment where the lines between human and animal blurred in the face of a mother's desperate hope and unwavering love. Inside the emergency shelter, Sarah worked with intense focus, her hands moving with practiced precision over the injured cub. The small space had transformed into a makeshift veterinary clinic, with medical supplies carefully arranged on every available surface. The wind howled outside, making the shelter's walls shudder, but Sarah remained steady in her methodical care. "The lacerations are deep," she reported, carefully cleaning each wound, but the cold actually helped prevent excessive blood loss. "It's the hypothermia I'm most worried about now." Emily watched from nearby, dividing her attention between the cub and the remarkable sight of the mother bear through the shelter's window. Despite the raging storm, the massive creature remained vigilant, her body positioned to block some of the wind from hitting the shelter. Every few minutes she would make soft vocalizations that her cub would answer weakly. "I've never seen anything like this," David said quietly, checking the shelter's heating system. "The way she's protecting the shelter, it's almost like she's guarding us." Emily nodded, her mind racing with the implications of what they were witnessing. "She's rewriting everything we thought we knew about polar bear behavior. This level of trust, this understanding of human intervention, it's unprecedented." Sarah continued her work, carefully stitching the worst of the lacerations. The cub remained surprisingly calm under her care, as if understanding the necessity of these uncomfortable procedures. When he occasionally whimpered, his mother's rumbling response from outside would immediately soothe him. "His temperature is starting to stabilize," Sarah announced after what felt like hours. "But we're not out of the woods yet. He'll need constant monitoring through the night." The storm showed no signs of abating, its fury transforming the Arctic landscape into a chaotic swirl of white outside their windows. The helicopter wouldn't be able to return until the weather cleared, leaving them isolated in this extraordinary situation. Emily began organizing their supplies, calculating how long they could sustain themselves and their unusual patient. "We have enough emergency rations for 3 days," she noted. "The shelter's power system is holding steady, but we need to be conservative with the heat." As night fell, the temperature outside plummeted even further. The mother bear's white form became almost invisible in the darkness, visible only when she moved past the shelter's external lights. Her dedication never wavered. She maintained her position, alternating between pacing a protective perimeter and resting near the shelter's entrance. Inside, they established a rotation for monitoring both the cub and their safety systems. Sarah refused to leave her patient's side, catching brief moments of rest while constantly checking his vital signs. The young bear's strength seemed to be gradually returning, his responses to treatment becoming more vigorous. "Look at this," Sarah called softly during one of her examinations. She pointed to how the cub was tracking their movements with alert eyes, his head lifting slightly when they approached. His awareness is improving. The medications are working. Emily moved closer, studying the cub's behavior. Despite his injuries and the strange environment, he showed no fear of their presence. If anything, he seemed to draw comfort from their proximity, much like he did from his mother's constant calls through the shelter walls. The mother's behavior is influencing him, Emily observed. He's taking his cues from her trust in us. This goes beyond basic survival instinct. There's something deeper happening here. David, who had been monitoring the weather conditions, joined them by the cub's bedside. The storm's supposed to peak around midnight. We're looking at another 12 hours at least, before any possibility of evacuation. The cub stirred at David's voice, letting out a small sound that prompted an immediate response from outside. The mother bear's silhouette appeared at the nearest window, her breath fogging the glass as she checked on her baby. The sight was both heart-wrenching and awe-inspiring, a testament to the power of maternal love transcending the barriers of species. "We should document everything," Emily said softly, though she knew their experience would challenge scientific skepticism. The way they're communicating, the mother's strategic positioning around the shelter, her understanding of our help, it's revolutionary. Sarah nodded, her hands gentle as she adjusted the cub's warming blankets. It's like she made a conscious choice to trust us. She could have tried to protect him herself, could have been aggressive, but instead, she trailed off, watching as the mother bear's shadow moved past another window, maintaining her vigil. The night deepened around them, the storm's violence contrasting sharply with the focused calm inside the shelter. They had created a small island of hope in the midst of the Arctic's fury, brought together by circumstances that defied explanation. As Emily watched Sarah tend to the cub and observed the mother bear's unwavering presence outside, she understood that they were part of something that would challenge the world's understanding of wildlife behavior and the connections possible between species. The pre-dawn hours brought a subtle shift in the storm's intensity. While the wind still howled outside, its fury had diminished enough for the team to make out the first hints of approaching daylight. Inside the shelter, Sarah's dedicated care through the night had yielded promising results. The cub's condition was showing steady improvement. "His body temperature has normalized," Sarah announced, checking her instruments with careful precision. "The wound sites are clean, no signs of infection. He's responding better than I could have hoped." Emily watched as the young bear attempted to lift his head, his movements stronger than they had been just hours before. Each small sign of improvement seemed to resonate with the mother bear outside, who had maintained her vigilant presence through the long night. Her occasional soft vocalizations had become more frequent, almost conversational in nature. "Listen to that," Emily said softly, as mother and cub exchanged gentle sounds. "She's encouraging him." The vocal patterns are different from typical polar bear communications. There's more variation, more intention. David, who had just finished checking their supplies, joined them by the cub's bedside. "The mother hasn't eaten or rested properly since we arrived. Her dedication is incredible." The observation struck Emily deeply. In all her years studying Arctic wildlife, she had never witnessed such sustained, purposeful behavior. The mother bear's actions suggested a level of understanding that went far beyond instinct. She was actively participating in her cub's recovery, cooperating with their efforts in a way that defied conventional wildlife behavior patterns. Sarah began preparing fresh bandages, her movements gentle and practiced. "We should try to get him to eat something soon. He'll need strength for the healing process." As if understanding their conversation, the cub's eyes tracked Sarah's movements with growing alertness. When she approached with some softened food appropriate for his condition, he showed interest, another positive sign that brought relief to the team. "Emily," David called from near the shelter's entrance, "you should see this." Through the reinforced windows, they could see the mother bear performing an unexpected behavior. She had cleared a small area of snow near the shelter's entrance, creating what appeared to be a resting spot with a clear view of both the shelter door and the surrounding area. Her actions seemed deliberately planned, almost strategic. "She's setting up a permanent position," Emily observed, her voice filled with wonder. "She's not just waiting. She's establishing herself as part of our setup here." The first true light of dawn was beginning to illuminate the Arctic landscape, revealing the aftermath of the night storm. The mother bear's white fur took on a golden hue in the early morning light, her massive form a study in patient strength. When she turned to look at the shelter, her eyes held an intelligence that continued to amaze the team. Sarah's voice broke through Emily's observations. "Look at this," she whispered excitedly. The cub had managed to take his first small bites of food, his movements careful but determined. Each successful attempt was met with gentle encouragement from his mother, her calls carrying clearly through the shelter walls. The synchronicity between them was remarkable, a demonstration of the unbreakable bond between mother and child that transcended their current circumstances. "We need to document every moment of this," Emily said, her scientist's mind racing with the implications. The way they're communicating, the mother's adaptive behaviors, the cub's trust in our treatment, it's all unprecedented. David nodded, but his expression held a hint of concern. The weather report shows another system moving in by nightfall. We need to make some decisions about long-term care versus attempting evacuation. The challenge ahead was clear. The cub's improvement was promising, but he was still far from ready to survive in the harsh Arctic environment. Yet keeping them in the shelter indefinitely wasn't a viable option either. They would need to find a way to work with both mother and cub to ensure the best possible outcome. Emily watched as Sarah continued her careful ministrations, the young bear now accepting treatment with surprising cooperation. Outside, his mother maintained her vigil, her presence a constant reminder of the trust she had placed in them. The morning light strengthened, illuminating their small sanctuary with a hope that seemed to grow with each passing moment. "We've created something extraordinary here," Emily reflected, her voice soft with wonder. "A bridge between our worlds, built on trust and compassion." The team's attention was drawn to a new sound. The cub had begun making small chirping noises that none of them had heard before. His mother immediately responded, her call carrying a different tone than her previous vocalizations. The exchange felt almost like a celebration of progress, a shared recognition of the healing taking place within their unlikely alliance. The morning light revealed both progress and new challenges. The cub's increasing strength was evident in his more frequent attempts to move, while his mother's behavior continued to evolve in ways that fascinated the team. Sarah had just finished changing his bandages when she noticed something remarkable. "Emily, David, come look at this," she called softly, gesturing to the cub's response to treatment. "He's not just tolerating the medical care anymore, he's actively cooperating. Watch." As they gathered around, they witnessed the young bear purposefully shifting his position to allow Sarah better access to his wounds. It was a level of understanding that went beyond mere compliance. It showed conscious participation in his own recovery. The mother's teaching him, Emily realized, watching the interaction. Every time he cooperates, she makes those specific vocalizations. She's literally showing him that we're helping. Outside, the mother bear had established a routine that seemed almost synchronized with their care schedule. She would pace the perimeter at regular intervals, always returning to her cleared spot near the entrance whenever they approached her cub. Her behavior had become so predictable that the team could almost set their watches by her movements. David, who had been monitoring their supplies and the approaching weather system, shared his concerns. "The next storm is moving in faster than expected. We have maybe 8 hours before it hits, and this one looks worse than the last." The news created a tense atmosphere in the shelter. The cub was improving, but he wasn't ready for exposure to the harsh Arctic elements. Yet staying in place through another severe storm carried its own risks. "Sarah, what's your medical assessment?" Emily asked, her mind already working through possible scenarios. Sarah ran her hands gently over the cub's healing wounds. "The lacerations are showing good signs of healing. He's maintaining his body temperature now and his appetite is improving, but..." She paused, considering her words carefully. "He's still very vulnerable. A premature return to the elements could reverse all our progress." The cub chose that moment to attempt standing, his movements wobbly but determined. His mother's reaction was immediate, a soft, encouraging rumble that seemed to vibrate through the shelter walls. The team watched in amazement as the young bear responded to his mother's call, taking a few shaky steps before settling back down. "Look at his muscle control," Sarah noted excitedly. "That's exactly what we hope to see. His nervous system is functioning properly despite the hypothermia he experienced." Emily moved to the window, studying the mother bear's reaction to her cub's achievement. The massive creature's body language spoke volumes. She was relaxed yet attentive, her movements deliberately gentle when she approached the shelter to peek in at her baby. "We're witnessing something revolutionary here," Emily spoke softly. "This isn't just about survival anymore. They're both learning, adapting, creating new patterns of behavior that bridge the gap between our species." David had been quiet, thinking through their situation. "What if we modified the shelter?" he suggested. "We could create a protected extension, something that would allow the mother closer access while maintaining the controlled environment the cub needs." The idea sparked immediate interest. Sarah looked up from her patient, her eyes bright with possibility. If we could bring them closer together physically, it might accelerate his recovery. The psychological benefit alone would be significant. Emily found herself nodding, already seeing how it could work. The mother's proven she understands boundaries and works with us rather than against us. This could be the next step in this extraordinary partnership. They began planning the modification, carefully considering both safety and practicality. The mother bear watched their increased activity with interest, her intelligent eyes following their movements as they gathered materials and discussed options. The cub, sensing the excitement in the shelter, became more active, attempting to follow their movements with his eyes and responding more frequently to his mother's calls. His vocalizations had grown stronger, more confident, carrying clearly through the shelter to where his mother maintained her vigil. "Listen to how their calls are changing," Emily observed. "They're developing new ways to communicate across this barrier we've created. It's as if they're building their own language around this situation." Sarah paused in her preparation of the cub's next meal to listen. The frequency and pattern of their vocalizations, it's unlike anything documented in polar bear research. "We're not just helping them survive, we're witnessing the evolution of their relationship in real time." As they worked, the bond between mother and cub seemed to strengthen despite the physical separation. Each small victory in the cub's recovery was shared through their unique communication, creating a bridge between the warm sanctuary of the shelter and the harsh Arctic world outside. The modification of the shelter began with careful precision. David led the structural work, while Emily maintained communication with the mother bear, whose attention was fixed on every movement of the team. The approaching storm added urgency to their task, but they couldn't afford to rush. The safety of both bears and humans depended on their exactitude. "We need to maintain the thermal integrity," David explained as he worked, his experienced hands moving with deliberate care. "The extension has to be as secure as our main shelter, but with flexibility for controlled interaction." Sarah continued monitoring the cub, who had become increasingly alert and interested in their activities. His improvement was marked by more frequent attempts to move and explore his immediate surroundings, though she kept him safely contained in his medical area. "He's getting stronger by the hour," she reported, her voice carrying pride and amazement. "His wounds are healing remarkably well, and his energy levels are noticeably higher." The mother bear, seemingly understanding that something significant was happening, had adjusted her position to watch the construction process. Her behavior continued to defy everything Emily knew about polar bear conduct. Instead of showing anxiety or aggression at the changes to her environment, she displayed patience and what could only be described as curiosity. "Look at how she's positioning herself," Emily observed, pointing to the bear's deliberate movements. "She's staying just far enough away to give us space to work, but close enough to monitor everything. This isn't just tolerance, it's active cooperation." As they worked, the wind began to pick up again, carrying the first hints of the approaching storm. The team moved with increased urgency, but never at the expense of safety. The extension took shape, a carefully designed space that would allow mother and cub to be closer, while maintaining the controlled environment necessary for the cub's continued recovery. "The thermal barriers are secure," David announced, testing the seals one final time. "And I've reinforced the viewing panel. She'll be able to see and smell her cub clearly, maybe even make physical contact through the protected opening." Sarah had been preparing the cub for the change, speaking to him in soft, soothing tones as she worked. The young bear's responses to her voice had become more pronounced, showing a level of trust that touched everyone's hearts. "The real test will be how the mother responds to the new structure," Emily said, watching the massive bear through the window. "Everything we've seen suggests she'll understand its purpose, but we need to be prepared for any reaction. The moment of truth came as they completed the final adjustments. Emily stepped outside, maintaining careful eye contact with the mother bear as she had done since the beginning of their extraordinary encounter. The wind whipped around them, carrying ice crystals that stung any exposed skin, but neither human nor bear broke their connection. "It's ready," Emily spoke softly to the bear, gesturing toward the new extension. "You can be closer to him now." What happened next left even Emily, with all her years of Arctic experience, in awe. The mother bear approached the extension with deliberate care, examining it from every angle. Her inspection was methodical, intelligent, far from the random investigation one might expect from a wild animal. When she finally positioned herself in the specially designed space, it was with a grace that belied her enormous size. Inside the shelter, the cub immediately responded to his mother's closer presence. His vocalizations became more animated, and he struggled to move toward her. Sarah helped him navigate to the protected opening, where mother and cub could finally experience a closer connection, while maintaining the safety and medical care he still needed. "This is extraordinary," Sarah whispered, watching as mother and cub shared a moment of intimate communication through the barrier. "The way they're adapting to this artificial environment, working with us instead of against us, it challenges everything we thought we knew about wildlife behavior." The approaching storm painted the sky in dark shades, but inside and around their shelter, a moment of pure connection unfolded. The mother bear had settled into the extension as if she had always known it would be there, her massive form providing additional shelter from the intensifying wind. Her presence seemed to energize her cub, whose movements grew stronger under her watchful eye. Emily watched the scene with a mix of professional fascination and deep emotional impact. "We're not just treating an injured animal anymore," she reflected. "We're participating in something that transcends the traditional boundaries between humans and wildlife. This is about trust, adaptation, and a level of interspecies cooperation that I never thought possible." The storm arrived with devastating force, transforming the Arctic landscape into a whirling maelstrom of white. Inside the shelter, the team watched as their modified structure faced its first real test. The mother bear, rather than seeking better protection elsewhere, pressed herself closer to the extension, her massive body creating an additional windbreak that helped shield the vulnerable area from the storm's fury. "The reinforcements are holding," David announced, monitoring the shelter's structural integrity with intense focus. "Her positioning is actually helping stabilize the extension. It's almost as if she understands exactly what needs to be done." Sarah continued her work with the cub, whose behavior had transformed remarkably since the completion of the modified shelter. The closer proximity to his mother had sparked a visible improvement in his demeanor and physical responses. His movements were more confident, his vocalizations stronger and more frequent. "His vital signs are the best we've seen," Sarah reported, her voice carrying both professional satisfaction and wonder. The psychological impact of being closer to his mother is dramatically accelerating his recovery. Emily observed the interaction between mother and cub through the protected opening with fascination. The bears had developed a pattern of communication that seemed to transcend their physical separation. Every few minutes, they would exchange soft vocalizations that varied in tone and duration, creating what appeared to be a complex dialogue. "Look at this," Emily called softly to her colleagues. "When he shows signs of discomfort during treatment, she makes that specific rumbling sound and he immediately calms down. She's actively participating in his medical care." The storm's intensity continued to increase, with wind speeds that threatened to drown out all other sounds. Yet within their reinforced shelter, a remarkable scene of interspecies cooperation unfolded. The mother bear's presence had become an integral part of their medical team, her instincts and intelligence working in harmony with their scientific knowledge. "The temperature's dropping rapidly outside," David warned, checking their instruments. "We're looking at least another 12 hours of this, maybe more." The mother bear seemed to sense the growing danger. Her movements became more purposeful, more protective. She positioned herself to block the worst of the wind from reaching the extension, her body creating a natural barrier against the elements. The sight of such a powerful predator working in concert with human efforts continued to amaze the team. Sarah took advantage of the cub's improved mood to conduct a thorough examination. "The wound healing is remarkable," she noted, gently probing the recovering areas. "I've never seen anything like this rate of recovery in Arctic wildlife. It's as if the combination of our medical care and his mother's presence is creating optimal healing conditions." The cub, who had once been too weak to lift his head, now tracked Sarah's movements with alert eyes. When she approached with fresh bandages, he adjusted his position without prompting, displaying a level of cooperation that seemed impossible for a wild animal. His mother watched every movement through the protected opening, her dark eyes reflecting an intelligence that challenged every preconception about wildlife behavior. Emily found herself drawn to the window, watching as the storm transformed the world outside into a canvas of swirling white. The contrast between the chaos beyond their shelter and the focused calm within struck her deeply. Here, in this small space they had created, something revolutionary was taking place. A bridge between species built on trust, necessity, and an understanding that transcended natural boundaries. "We're witnessing evolution in action," she spoke softly, her words carrying weight despite the storm's constant roar. "Not physical evolution, but behavioral. They're adapting to us as much as we're adapting to them, creating new patterns of interaction that shouldn't be possible." The mother bear chose that moment to demonstrate this evolution. As Sarah prepared for another treatment session, the massive predator began a series of soft, rhythmic vocalizations that immediately captured her cub's attention. Under the influence of his mother's gentle sounds, the young bear remained perfectly still as Sarah worked, his trust in the humans now seemingly absolute. "She's learned our routine," Sarah realized, her voice filled with wonder. "She knows exactly when we need him to be calm and still. This goes beyond basic intelligence. This is active, purposeful cooperation." As the storm raged outside, their shelter had become a crucible for something unprecedented in human-wildlife interaction. The boundary between caregiver and patient had blurred, creating a collaborative effort between species that defied explanation. The mother bear's presence, far from complicating their medical efforts, had become essential to their success. Through the protected opening, mother and cub maintained their constant connection, their bonds strengthening even as the storm tested the physical barriers between them. Their relationship had become a symbol of hope and resilience, proving that even in the harshest conditions, trust and cooperation could flourish between the most unlikely allies. At midnight, the storm reached its peak intensity. The shelter groaned under the relentless assault of Arctic winds, while the temperature outside plummeted to levels that made every creak of the structure sound like a warning. Inside, the team maintained their vigilance, their attention divided between monitoring their shelter's integrity and continuing their extraordinary care mission. "The main support beams are holding," David reported, his voice barely audible above the storm's fury. "But these wind speeds are beyond what the shelter was designed to handle. We're pushing the limits of the structure's tolerance." Sarah remained focused on the cub, whose behavior had become increasingly alert despite the chaos outside. The young bear's progress continued to defy expectations, his responses to treatment growing stronger with each passing hour. The mother bear's constant presence through the modified extension had created an atmosphere of security that seemed to accelerate his healing. "His recovery rate is unprecedented," Sarah observed, completing another check of his vital signs. "The way he's responding to treatment, adapting to our presence, it's as if he understands exactly what we're trying to do." A particularly violent gust of wind rattled the shelter, causing everyone to freeze. Through the protected opening, they could see the mother bear adjust her position, pressing herself more firmly against the extension. Her massive form provided crucial protection against the storm's onslaught, her instincts working in perfect harmony with their technological safeguards. "Look at how she's positioning herself," Emily pointed out, her voice filled with wonder. "She's not just seeking shelter, she's actively reinforcing our weakest points. The intelligence behind her actions is remarkable." The cub, sensing the tension in the air, began to show signs of distress. Before any of the humans could react, his mother started a series of soft, rhythmic vocalizations that immediately captured his attention. The effect was instantaneous. The young bear calmed, his eyes fixed on his mother's form, visible through the opening. "The complexity of their communication is astounding," Emily observed, watching the interaction. Each sound seems to carry specific meaning, adapted to the situation at hand. They're creating new patterns of behavior in response to these unprecedented circumstances. Sarah took advantage of the cub's calm state to change his bandages. The healing progress was visible. Wounds that had threatened his survival just days ago were now showing remarkable signs of recovery. The mother bear watched the procedure intently, her dark eyes following every movement of Sarah's hands. "She's learning our medical routine," Sarah said softly. "Watch how she adjusts her vocalizations based on what we're doing. When I need him to stay still, she changes her tone. When I'm finished, she makes a different sound entirely." The storm unleashed another furious assault on their shelter, and this time a concerning crack echoed through the space. David immediately moved to inspect the source, his expression tense. The mother bear's reaction was immediate and unexpected. She shifted her position to press against the exact area where the sound had originated, her massive body providing critical support. "This is beyond instinct," Emily breathed, watching the bear's deliberate actions. "She's not just protecting her cub, she's actively working to preserve the entire shelter. She understands that our survival is linked to her baby's recovery." The cub, despite the storm's violence, showed remarkable composure. His eyes tracked the movements of his human caregivers with growing recognition, and his responses to their presence had evolved from mere tolerance to what appeared to be genuine trust. When Sarah approached with his medication, he shifted position to accommodate her without prompting. "The barriers between wild and tame are blurring," Sarah observed, her voice thoughtful as she worked. "Not in the sense of domestication, but in terms of mutual understanding and cooperation. They're still completely wild, yet they've chosen to work with us in ways that should be impossible." Hours passed in this strange harmony of human and ursine cooperation. The storm continued its relentless assault, but within their shelter, something beautiful was unfolding. The mother bear maintained her protective stance, alternating between supporting vulnerable sections of the structure and communicating with her cub through their unique language of sounds and gestures. Emily found herself documenting every detail of their interaction, knowing that what they were witnessing would challenge scientific understanding of wildlife behavior. The bears had transcended their natural instincts, adapting to an artificial environment and human presence in ways that defied explanation. Yet there was nothing artificial about the trust and cooperation they demonstrated. It was as real and raw as the Arctic wilderness itself. As the first hints of dawn began to pierce the Arctic darkness, the storm's fury gradually began to subside. The shelter, though battered, had withstood nature's onslaught thanks to the remarkable partnership between human engineering and ursine instinct. The mother bear remained steadfast at her post, her massive form still braced against the extension where the storm had threatened their sanctuary. "Structure assessment shows minimal damage," David reported, completing his inspection as the wind's howl diminished to a more manageable roar. "The reinforcements held, largely thanks to our unexpected architectural assistant out there." Sarah had used the long night hours to conduct a thorough evaluation of the cub's progress. The young bear's resilience through the storm had been remarkable, his trust in his human caregivers growing stronger with each passing hour. Even more fascinating was how his responses to treatment had evolved, showing an almost intuitive understanding of their medical procedures. "His recovery has actually accelerated during the storm," Sarah announced, her voice carrying a note of amazement. "It's as if the increased proximity to his mother, combined with our care, created optimal healing conditions. The wound sites are showing advanced regeneration, and his overall strength has improved significantly." Emily watched the interaction between mother and cub with growing fascination. Throughout the night, they had maintained their unique communication, developing new vocalizations that seemed specifically adapted to their current situation. The mother bear's calls had taken on different patterns when responding to various aspects of their care routine. "The complexity of their adaptation is unprecedented," Emily observed, making careful notes of her observations. "They're not just tolerating our presence anymore, they're actively incorporating our methods into their behavior patterns." The cub demonstrated this evolution by voluntarily presenting his healing wounds for Sarah's inspection, a behavior that his mother appeared to encourage through soft, rhythmic sounds. The trust displayed was so profound, it brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "I never thought I'd see anything like this," she whispered, gently examining the healing tissues. "He's not just allowing treatment, he's participating in it. And look at his mother's response every time he cooperates." The mother bear's behavior continued to challenge everything they thought they knew about wildlife interactions. She had maintained her protective position through the worst of the storm, but her attention remained divided between supporting the structure and monitoring her cub's care. Her dark eyes followed their movements with an intelligence that seemed to grow more apparent with each passing hour. "The storm's almost past," David announced, checking their weather instruments. "But the damage to the surrounding ice field might be substantial. We need to assess our situation once we have proper daylight." As if understanding the gravity of his words, the mother bear shifted her position slightly, allowing them a better view of the world outside their shelter. The first true light of dawn revealed the storm's impact. The landscape had been transformed, with new pressure ridges and ice formations creating a treacherous maze around their position. Emily moved to the window, studying the changed terrain with concern. "The evacuation route we planned earlier won't be viable anymore. We need to rethink our approach to the next phase of recovery." The cub, sensing the shift in atmosphere, attempted to stand again. His movements were stronger than before, more coordinated, but still showing the need for continued care. His mother's response was immediate, a gentle rumble that seemed to both encourage and caution, causing him to settle back down while maintaining his alert posture. "Their bond has evolved beyond anything I've ever witnessed," Sarah noted, watching the interaction. "She's not just protecting him anymore, she's teaching him how to navigate this unique situation. Every sound, every gesture carries specific meaning." The morning light strengthened, illuminating their shelter with a pale golden glow. The mother bear's white fur took on an almost ethereal quality in the dawn light, her presence a powerful reminder of the natural world's capacity for adaptation and cooperation. Despite the challenges that lay ahead, the team felt a growing sense of optimism. "We've created something extraordinary here," Emily reflected, her voice soft with wonder. "A partnership that transcends the traditional boundaries between humans and wildlife. Whatever comes next, this experience has changed our understanding of what's possible." The cub's response to his mother's continued presence through the protected opening had become more nuanced, his vocalizations matching hers in increasingly sophisticated patterns. Their communication had evolved into a complex dialogue that seemed to encompass both their current situation and their growing relationship with their human caregivers. The full light of day revealed both progress and new challenges. The transformed Arctic landscape surrounding their shelter created a complex puzzle that the team needed to solve. Inside, the cub's remarkable recovery continued, but with it came the increasingly pressing question of when and how to transition him back to his natural environment. "His wound healing has exceeded all expectations," Sarah reported during her morning examination. "The tissue regeneration is remarkable, and his strength is returning faster than I would have thought possible." The mother bear remained a constant presence, her behavior evolving further as she seemed to sense the approaching transition. Her interactions with the team had developed an almost collaborative quality, particularly during medical procedures. When Sarah approached the cub for his morning treatment, the mother bear initiated what had become their routine, a series of soft vocalizations that helped keep her baby calm and cooperative. "Watch this," Emily called softly to her colleagues. "She's not just communicating with him now, she's actively preparing him for each step of the procedure." The sophistication of their interaction is extraordinary. David had spent the early morning hours assessing their situation. "The storm has created new pressure ridges all around us. The ice field has been completely restructured. Our original evacuation plan needs to be entirely reconsidered." The cub demonstrated his growing strength by standing fully for the first time since his rescue, his movements still cautious, but showing marked improvement. His mother's response was immediate, a gentle, encouraging sound that seemed to carry both pride and caution. The young bear took a few tentative steps, his balance improving with each movement. "His motor control is nearly back to normal," Sarah observed, watching the cub's progress with professional satisfaction. "But he's still not ready for the harsh conditions out there. We need to find the right balance between continuing his recovery and preparing him for release." Emily moved to the window, studying the mother bear's behavior as she maintained her vigil. The massive creature's presence had become so integrated into their routine that it was hard to remember she was a wild predator, one of the Arctic's most formidable hunters. Yet here she was, participating in an unprecedented collaboration with humans for the sake of her cub. "The next phase will be critical," Emily said, her voice thoughtful. "We need to begin conditioning him for the return to wild conditions, but in a way that doesn't compromise his recovery. And we need his mother's continued cooperation to make it work." As if understanding the importance of the moment, the mother bear shifted her position, moving to where she could make direct eye contact with Emily through the window. The intelligence in her gaze seemed to convey an understanding of the challenges ahead, a shared awareness of the delicate balance they needed to maintain. Sarah approached the protected opening with the cub's morning meal, and they witnessed another example of their extraordinary partnership. The mother bear began a new vocalization, different from her previous sounds, which prompted the cub to approach his food with renewed enthusiasm. "She's teaching him," Sarah realized, watching the interaction. Every new situation becomes a learning opportunity. She's not just waiting for him to recover, she's actively preparing him for what comes next. The cub's movements had become more confident with each passing hour. He navigated the space in the shelter with growing assurance, his curiosity about his surroundings becoming more evident. Yet he remained remarkably responsive to both his mother's guidance and the team's care, creating a unique dynamic that bridged the wild and human worlds. "We need to start planning the transition," David said, laying out maps of the surrounding area. "But the changed ice field means we'll need to be even more careful. One wrong step out there could undo everything we've achieved." The mother bear's attention shifted to their discussion, her ears perking up at the change in their tone. Her intelligence continued to amaze them. She seemed to sense the significance of their planning, adjusting her position to watch their movements more closely. "Look at how she responds to our focus," Emily noted. "She's not just reacting to our presence anymore, she's reading our behavior, anticipating our intentions. This goes beyond basic animal intelligence. We're witnessing something truly extraordinary." The morning light strengthened, casting long shadows across the transformed Arctic landscape. Inside their shelter, human and ursine worlds continued to merge in ways that defied scientific understanding. The bond they had formed, born of necessity and nurtured by trust, had created something unprecedented in the field of wildlife conservation. The afternoon brought a brief window of clear weather, offering the team their first real opportunity to begin preparing for the challenging transition ahead. The cub's progress had reached a critical point. His physical recovery was remarkable, but the return to the harsh Arctic environment would require careful planning and perfect timing. "His final wound check shows excellent healing," Sarah reported, completing what she knew would be one of her last full examinations. "His strength has returned to nearly normal levels, and his mobility is improving by the hour." The mother bear's behavior had shifted subtly as well, her protective instincts now blending with what appeared to be preparation for their eventual departure. She had begun making short excursions from her position near the shelter, always returning with renewed purpose, as if scouting their surroundings. "She's mapping the new ice formations," Emily observed, watching the bear's methodical movements. "Look at how she tests each new path, how she's creating safe routes through the pressure ridges. She's not just planning for herself, she's preparing a way for her cub." David had been working on modifying their equipment to create a transition zone, a protected area that would allow the cub to experience more of the natural environment while still maintaining access to the shelter's safety. "We need to help him acclimate gradually," he explained, adjusting the new structure. The temperature difference alone could be shocking to his system. The cub watched their preparations with growing interest, his movements becoming more purposeful as he explored the limits of his restored strength. When his mother appeared at the protected opening, their vocal exchanges took on new patterns, more urgent, more focused on the world beyond the shelter. "The complexity of their communication continues to evolve," Emily noted, carefully documenting each new vocalization. "They're not just sharing comfort anymore, they're actively planning. Every sound, every response seems to carry specific information about their upcoming journey." Sarah prepared what she knew would be one of the final medical treatments, her movements carrying both professional pride and a touch of emotion. The cub's cooperation had become so natural that it was easy to forget how extraordinary their situation was. A wild Arctic predator, willingly participating in human medical care. "We need to begin reducing his dependence on our treatment schedule," Sarah said softly, checking his vital signs one more time. "The transition back to full wild behavior needs to be as smooth as possible." The mother bear seemed to sense the significance of these changes. Her presence became more active, her vocalizations more frequent and varied. Through the protected opening, she began what appeared to be a series of teaching moments with her cub, specific calls that prompted him to test his strength in new ways. "She's taking control of his rehabilitation," Emily realized, watching the interaction. "Look at how she guides his movements, how she encourages him to push his limits while still respecting his healing process." The cub's responses to his mother's guidance showed growing confidence. He would attempt new movements, testing his recovered strength, always under the watchful eyes of both his mother and his human caregivers. The blend of wild instinct and learned trust created a unique dynamic that none of them had ever witnessed before. "The window of favorable weather won't last long," David warned, checking their instruments. "We need to make the most of this time to prepare both the cub and ourselves for what comes next." The mother bear's reaction to their increased activity was remarkable. She began alternating between encouraging her cub's exercises and watching their preparations, her intelligent eyes following every detail of their work. When they moved equipment toward the transition zone, she adjusted her position to maintain clear sight lines to both her cub and their activities. "We're not just releasing them back to the wild," Emily reflected, watching the bear's synchronized movements. "We're participating in a graduation of sorts, a transition that honors both their natural instincts and the extraordinary trust they've placed in us." The afternoon light cast long shadows across the ice, creating a dramatic backdrop for their preparations. Inside the shelter, the cub continued his exercises under his mother's guidance, each movement stronger than the last. The bond between humans and bears had created something unprecedented, a partnership that respected both the wild and human elements of their shared experience. The moment of transition began with the soft golden light of Arctic dawn. The team had spent the night making final preparations, while the mother bear maintained her vigilant presence, her behavior showing an almost prescient understanding of what was to come. The cub, stronger than ever, seemed to sense the significance of the approaching change, his movements carrying a new purpose. "All final medical checks are complete," Sarah announced, her voice steady despite the emotion clearly visible in her eyes. "His recovery has exceeded every expectation we had. He's ready for the next step." The transition zone they had created formed a careful gradient between the shelter's protected environment and the harsh reality of the Arctic wilderness. David had engineered it to allow for a gradual adaptation to the temperature and wind conditions that awaited the young bear. "The weather window is holding," he reported, studying their instruments. "We have about 6 hours of optimal conditions before the next weather system moves in." Emily watched as the mother bear began what appeared to be a deliberate preparation routine. She would pace specific patterns around the transition zone, stopping at regular intervals to make distinct vocalizations that her cub responded to with increasing enthusiasm. "She's not just calling to him now," Emily observed, documenting every detail of their interaction. "She's creating a map of sorts, teaching him the safe paths through the new ice formations. Every sound has purpose. Every movement carries information." The cub's response to his mother's guidance showed the remarkable evolution of their bond. His movements had become more coordinated, more purposeful, matching his mother's rhythms while maintaining the careful awareness they had taught him during his recovery. "Look at how he's integrating both worlds," Sarah noted, watching the young bear's behavior. "He's using the strength-building exercises we taught him, but applying them to his natural movements. It's an incredible blend of learned behavior and instinct." The moment to begin the transition arrived with a subtle shift in the mother bear's behavior. She positioned herself at the entrance to the transition zone, making a series of soft, encouraging sounds that held new urgency. The cub's response was immediate. He moved toward the protected opening with confidence, though he still looked back at his human caregivers. "This is it," Emily whispered, her heart racing with a mix of professional excitement and personal emotion. "Everything we've worked for comes down to these next few moments. The team had carefully designed this phase of the transition. The protected opening would allow the cub to experience the natural environment while maintaining access to the shelter's safety. Sarah stood ready with monitoring equipment, while David maintained watch over the structural integrity of their setup. "His vital signs are strong," Sarah reported as the cub took his first steps into the transition zone. "He's handling the temperature change exactly as we hoped." The mother bear's patience during this process was extraordinary. She maintained her position, offering constant encouragement through their unique vocal language, but never rushing her cub's careful exploration of the new space. Her behavior demonstrated an understanding of the delicate balance required for this transition. "The sophistication of their communication is remarkable," Emily noted, watching their interaction. "Every move he makes is guided by her signals, but she's incorporating our safety protocols into her instruction. It's as if she's created a new language that bridges our two worlds." The cub's confidence grew with each step into the transition zone. His movements showed the strength they had helped him rebuild, while his responses to his mother's calls demonstrated the unbreakable bond between them. When he reached the midpoint of the transition area, he paused, testing the colder air with newfound awareness. "His adaptations are perfect," Sarah observed, monitoring his responses. "The gradual exposure is allowing his system to adjust exactly as we planned." The mother bear's pride was almost palpable as she watched her cub navigate this new challenge. Her posture remained protective, but increasingly relaxed, showing trust in both her cub's abilities and the safety measures the team had put in place. The Arctic sun painted the ice in shades of gold and pink as the cub ventured further into the transition zone. His movements had grown more confident with each passing hour, the natural instincts of his species blending seamlessly with the careful training he had received during his recovery. The mother bear maintained her watchful presence, her guidance now focused on preparing him for their imminent return to the wild. "His adaptation to the temperature changes is remarkable," Sarah reported, monitoring the cub's vital signs from a distance. "Every indicator shows he's ready for the final transition." Emily watched the interaction between mother and cub with a mixture of professional fascination and deep emotional investment. Their communication had evolved into something beyond anything documented in wildlife behavior, a complex language that incorporated both natural instincts and learned responses to human presence. "Look at how she's teaching him to read the ice," Emily observed, noting how the mother bear would tap specific areas with her paw, producing different sounds that her cub would immediately respond to. "She's passing on generations of survival knowledge while incorporating what he learned during his recovery." The cub demonstrated his growing confidence by testing different surfaces in the transition zone, his movements showing the strength and agility they had worked so hard to restore. When he encountered a particularly challenging section, he would look to his mother for guidance, their exchange of vocalizations becoming more nuanced and specific. "The integration of his natural abilities with what we taught him is perfect," Sarah noted, her voice soft with wonder. "He's not just recovering. He's evolving, adapting, becoming stronger than he might have been without this experience." David, who had been monitoring the weather conditions, approached with his latest readings. "The window of clear weather is holding, but we need to be mindful of timing. The next system approaching from the north could make travel difficult." The mother bear seemed to sense the urgency in their discussion. Her calls to her cub took on a new pattern, more focused, more directive. The young bear responded with increasing purpose, his explorations becoming more systematic, as if preparing for a journey. "She's not just encouraging him now," Emily realized, watching their interaction. "She's actively teaching him how to navigate the new ice formations. Every sound, every gesture is part of preparing him for their departure." The cub's responses to his mother's guidance showed the extraordinary balance they had achieved between wild instinct and learned behavior. He would test each new surface carefully, using the strength-building techniques they had taught him, while following his mother's natural instruction. Sarah prepared for what she knew would be her final health check, though it would have to be done from a distance now. "His movement patterns show complete recovery," she observed, her professional pride evident in her voice. "The way he's distributing his weight, testing his balance, it's all exactly as it should be." The mother bear's behavior continued to amaze them. She would demonstrate specific techniques for her cub, how to test ice thickness, how to find secure footing in the newly formed pressure ridges, while maintaining her extraordinary connection with the human team. Her intelligence and adaptation to their presence had created something unprecedented in wildlife research. We're witnessing something that will change our understanding of wildlife behavior forever, Emily reflected, documenting every detail of their interaction. This isn't just about physical recovery anymore. It's about the potential for true cooperation between species. The cub ventured to the outer edge of the transition zone, where the protected environment began to merge with the true Arctic wilderness. His mother's encouraging calls guided each step, but there was a new confidence in his movements that spoke of readiness for the challenges ahead. The bond they formed with us hasn't diminished their wild nature, Emily noted, watching as the cub navigated an especially challenging section of ice. If anything, it's enhanced their natural abilities, adding new dimensions to their survival skills. The sun reached its zenith, casting crisp shadows across the ice field. The mother bear positioned herself strategically, creating a clear path for her cub while maintaining visual contact with the team. Her behavior continued to demonstrate the remarkable trust that had developed between them, even as she prepared for their return to their natural world. The moment of final transition arrived with the gentle grace of an Arctic afternoon. The cub stood at the threshold between the protected zone and the vast wilderness beyond, his posture strong and confident, a far cry from the injured creature they had found just days ago. The mother bear positioned herself slightly ahead, her massive form silhouetted against the pristine white landscape, waiting with remarkable patience for her cub to take his final steps toward freedom. "All vital signs are perfect," Sarah whispered, performing her last distant assessment. "His recovery is complete. He's ready." Emily watched the scene unfold with a profound sense of witnessing something extraordinary. The mother bear turned to look at the team one last time, her dark eyes carrying an intelligence and awareness that had forever changed their understanding of wildlife behavior. In that moment, the connection between human and animal transcended all scientific explanation. "She's saying goodbye," Emily realized, her voice thick with emotion. "She understands exactly what's happening." The cub took a few steps forward, then paused, turning to look back at the shelter that had been his sanctuary. His eyes moved from one team member to another, displaying a recognition that seemed impossible for a wild animal. When he vocalized, it wasn't the sound of a predator, but a soft, almost gentle call that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "Listen to that tone," Emily noted, quickly documenting these final moments. "It's different from any polar bear vocalization we've ever recorded. He's developed a specific way of communicating with us." David, who had maintained their safety throughout the entire ordeal, stood watching with undisguised amazement. "In all my years of rescue work, I've never seen anything like this. They're not just leaving, they're acknowledging us." The mother bear began a series of soft calls, each one seeming to carry specific meaning. The cub responded, moving forward with growing confidence. His movements showed the perfect integration of natural instinct and the strength they had helped him rebuild. Each step was sure, each movement purposeful. "Look at his gait," Sarah observed professionally, though her voice trembled slightly. "Perfect weight distribution, complete recovery of muscle control. He's actually stronger than when we found him." The mother bear's patience during these final moments demonstrated the extraordinary trust that had developed between them. She waited, watching her cub make his own way toward her, offering encouragement, but allowing him to demonstrate his recovered independence. When the cub finally reached his mother's side, their reunion was a moment of pure beauty. She gently nuzzled him, their white fur blending together against the Arctic landscape. Their vocalizations changed, becoming more natural, more wild, a reminder that despite their remarkable interaction with humans, they remained creatures of the wilderness. "They're ready," Emily said softly, understanding that it was time to let them go. "They need to leave while the weather holds." The mother bear seemed to understand. She looked one final time at the team, her pose proud and strong. Then, with deliberate grace, she turned and began leading her cub across the ice field. They moved together with perfect synchronization, their movements demonstrating both the young bear's complete recovery and his mother's expert guidance. The team watched in respectful silence as the bears made their way across the transformed Arctic landscape. The mother had chosen their path carefully, following the safe routes she had scouted during her vigilant watch. The cub matched her pace, his strength and confidence growing with each step into his restored freedom. "What we've witnessed here," Emily reflected, her voice carrying the weight of scientific revelation, "will change our understanding of wildlife behavior forever. This wasn't just a rescue, it was proof of possibilities we never imagined." Sarah nodded, wiping away tears as she watched her patient disappear into the vastness of the Arctic. "They trusted us completely, but never lost their wild nature. That's what makes this so extraordinary." The bears paused at the crest of an ice ridge, their white forms stark against the pale blue sky. The mother bear turned one last time, rising briefly on her hind legs, a final acknowledgement of the humans who had helped save her cub. Then, with majestic grace, she dropped back to all fours, and mother and cub vanished into their natural habitat. The team stood in silence, watching the spot where the bears had disappeared. The empty landscape before them seemed to hold the echo of something miraculous, a moment when the boundaries between human and wild had blurred, creating something beautiful and unprecedented. "They'll be all right," David said with quiet confidence, looking at the clear tracks the bears had left in the snow. "She knows these territories, and he's stronger than ever." Emily nodded, her heart full of an emotion that transcended scientific achievement. They had been part of something extraordinary, a collaboration between species that proved the power of trust, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. Dear listeners, we hope this extraordinary tale of trust, healing, and connection across species has touched your hearts as deeply as it transformed the lives of Dr. Emily Carter and her team. The remarkable bond between the mother bear and her cub, and their unprecedented trust in their human helpers, reminds us that nature holds mysteries we are still discovering. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of hope and connection in the natural world. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how this amazing journey of survival and trust affected you. Don't forget to like this video and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more incredible stories that challenge our understanding of the wild world around us. Together, let's continue exploring the extraordinary possibilities that exist when compassion bridges the gap between humans and wildlife.